What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and I'll be honest with you. I did not want to make this video. Today is a Monday, February 6th, 2023. The Super Bowl will be played on Sunday afternoon between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And we are here to talk about the second team that I mentioned. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing here to the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel because most of the time we make videos that I enjoy, not necessarily this one. We're on our way to 20,000 subscribers, so thank you to those of you who have joined us for the ride to this point, and we'll continue to do so. Make sure to subscribe to the Blog on the Boys podcast network. Just because the Cowboys season is over does not mean that we have nothing to talk about. In fact, we have even more to talk about in some respects. We're going to have a lot to talk about this week. Some special guests slated to join us here at BTB in the run-up to the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, the game itself will involve the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, look, I don't want to admit that the Eagles are a very good team, that the Eagles are very well run, but we have to admit it, right? We have to be honest with ourselves, with the Cowboys, with the world. We have to be objective. We have to be reasonable. Sure, we can have our fun and make our jokes and say things like we're not going to root for them because we're not. We're rooting for the Chiefs. At least I hope we are, you and I. But look, it's the truth. The Eagles are a very well-run team. They are a very good team. Miss me with this, they haven't played anybody. I understand all that stuff, but they have gotten to the Super Bowl. They are 60 minutes away from a world championship, and that bothers me greatly. And what bothers me even more is to sit here and tell you and tell myself that the Cowboys need to be more like them. The Cowboys have to become more like the Eagles if they want to do the things that the Eagles are doing, which is playing in all of these important games. And look, we're all going to have our fun and take our laps right on Sunday if the Chiefs do wind up winning. But at the end of the day, if the Chiefs win this game, that means the Eagles lost, but that means the Eagles lost the Super Bowl. You know what I would give to lose the Super Bowl right now? I feel so pathetic saying that out loud. So last week, the Cowboys were at the Senior Bowl like everybody in the NFL. And Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones spoke. We did a video about that and kind of recapped all of the important things and big takeaways that we had from what they said. But this tweet was making the rounds. Shout out to John Machota of The Athletic, who was kind enough to transcribe it. I'm just going to read it to you. This is Jerry Jones talking about Cowboys team building. I know you can read it, but the whole point of the video is for me to talk, so I'm just going to do that. Anybody who thinks I won't take a chance has misread the tea leaves, but I do think longer term. Interesting, by the way, tea leaves. I know that the new Harry Potter game's coming out. I don't know if that's like part of the stuff, but whatever. But I do think longer term, and I'm real hesitant to bet it all for a year. There's a lot of things that can happen for that year. In essence, we're seeing a couple of teams talking about the Rams and the Eagles. Obviously, the Rams won the Super Bowl a year ago. Talking about a couple of teams that have had some real success putting it all out there and paying for it later. Don't think that doesn't pop in my head and get my eye as far as doing it. And I know how to do that. It's part of what you put in that computer and what comes out. We'll see how it comes, but that's pretty impressive to have two teams in the last 2 years empty the bucket and get to the Super Bowl. But if you miss, it's a long go. Now, here's the thing. First of all, if you're putting enormous stock into what Jerry's saying and taking it super literally, I think you're missing the point. But it is obviously important what Jerry is saying. He's the most important person, with regards to the Cowboys, given his role, et cetera, et cetera. I do think that as a football society, we make too much out of this team went all in. I think we throw that term out in way too cavalier of a way. Because I don't think the Rams and the Eagles went all in. I understand the trades they made. I understand that the bill comes due and all sorts of things. I understand the Rams are kind of a unique example with how often they trade their first-round picks and things like that. But does anybody really feel like the Eagles are all in? Does anybody really feel like the Eagles are set up poorly for the future? I mean, the Eagles have the 10th overall pick in the draft because they're wise, because they're always moving. And that's the pick that obviously belonged to the New Orleans Saints, by the way. But that pick, if you trace it back, came from trading away Carson Wentz and being willing to deal and move and jump around and dance and all sorts of things. I mean, the Eagles, one of their best playmakers on this team is Devontae Smith, and they got him by trading up with us, with the Dallas Cowboys 2 years ago. I mean, so they are unafraid to move. And because of that, I don't think the Eagles are positioned poorly. Yes, they are going to, in all likelihood, give quarterback Jalen Hurts a big-time, massive contract extension this offseason, and maybe he winds up playing poorly in the future. Maybe whatever, they regret giving him the deal. But you know what will happen if they regret giving him the deal? They will move on. And that is something that the Eagles are elite at, that the Dallas Cowboys, unfortunately, are not. So I have four things that I want to focus on that the Cowboys have to kind of take away and learn from the Eagles. And I'm going to start right there. It is important for the Cowboys to be willing to admit their mistakes and to move on from them. All right. So let's live in that hypothetical I talked about, right? Oh, man, the Eagles gave Jalen Hurts this big time $200 million, whatever contract, and now he stinks. What are they going to do? What did they do after they did that with another quarterback, right? Remember? Do you not remember? Do any of us remember the Eagles giving Carson Wentz a, franchise-sized quarterback contract, franchise quarterback-sized contract? It was in line with the market. It was among the rates or among the avenue that we thought the Cowboys should be giving Dak Prescott the same deal as, and the Cowboys did not. Remind yourself what it was like in 2019. At the time, the Los Angeles Rams paid Jared Goff that big-time contract. The Philadelphia Eagles paid Carson Wentz that big-time contract. The Dallas Cowboys did not. The Cowboys decided to drag their feet. They went on and on. They had to franchise tag Dak Prescott, and they ultimately wound up paying him more money. Now, ultimately, Dak is a much better quarterback than Jared Goff was with the Rams or Carson Wentz was with the Eagles, but you have to understand this idea of market rate. And the Eagles and Rams both understood we're going to have to pay these dudes. We're going to have to give them market rate contracts. Let's do it as soon as possible so it is as low as possible. And if something happens along the way, we'll figure it out. We'll work our way. We'll think our way out of this situation. What did the Rams do? They got out of the Jared Goff situation. And what happened? They won the Super Bowl. What did the Eagles do? They got out of the Carson Wentz situation. And what happened? They are in the Super Bowl. And so you cannot be afraid to say, man, that big time contract that we gave to somebody, man, let's move on, right? We don't we're not married to the contract. This was a point I loved it that Kelsey Charles brought up on one of our podcast episodes at Blocking the Boys last Friday on Girls Talking Boys. You cannot be afraid to admit mistakes, and I think a glaring example of this, and he's been a wonderful player for the Cowboys, but is Zeke Elliott. That contract was a horrible decision for the Cowboys, and so you do not have to live in this sunk cost fallacy where you're trying to get the most you can out of it because you paid that money. You paid the money. That sucks. But you know what? You can move on. You can hit the reset button. You can get up and you can make a decision. And the Rams did that. They still won a Super Bowl after that. The Eagles did that. They are in the Super Bowl after that. The Cowboys can do that in a number of different ways. The Zeke contract is just one of them. But overall, it's a philosophical thing. You cannot be afraid to admit your mistake and to move on. So that's a tough pill to swallow. Number two, Dallas Cowboys need to be aggressive in terms of team building. And this kind of falls in line with that, right? Being, willing and able to admit a mistake is a point of aggression. And we're going to get to that in a moment when it comes to some decisions. But look at what the Eagles did. And that's why I disagree with this idea that, they are stuck or whatever. I mean, they have A.J. Brown, who they traded for on the night of the draft, the first night of the draft. They traded a first-round pick for him. They still have 2 this year, and they have a second-round pick next year coming from the New Orleans Saints. If you are wise, if you are smart, and I realize that how stupid that sounds for me to say here comfortably from my office, right? Like, just be smart, just make all these trades. But I mean, if that's your job, if if that's literally your job to kind of understand these things, you kind of have to do those things. So you cannot just expect to every year sit and pick in your first round slot and draft Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer and win the Super Bowl that way. The Eagles were a playoff team a year ago, and you can argue they were kind of a weak playoff team. They were the 7th seed, in case anybody remembers. They lost to the Buccaneers, and they were still kind of figuring out who they were under Nick Sirianni with their super run-heavy approach. They've obviously changed in some ways this year. But my point is, the Eagles could have said, you know what, we were a playoff team. We have 2 first-round picks. Let's draft some rookies. Let's build around these rookie contracts, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know what they did? They said, no, we think we're pretty good. We can be even better. A.J. Brown's out there. Let's go get him. I'm making this hypothetical up. I'm not even saying I'm invested in this idea personally, but DeAndre Hopkins, there's a lot of chatter that he wants out of Arizona. They want to move on, whatever. Again, I'm not saying that's the example. This is just a hypothetical to prove my point. You have a star wide receiver, Dallas Cowboys, and CeeDee Lamb, but you need some help. I mean, you can, like, you should never consider that you have enough. That's what aggression is to me. You should never be content to say, we're good, we have enough, we're ready to move on. No, you do not know. You do not know what's lurking around the corner. You do not know what situation you may find yourself in. So you always want to have more, 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 more. It's like Adam Driver in episode 9 when he's like, more, when he's just firing. No, I think it's episode 8 when they're firing at Luke Skywalker down on the ground. So that's who you have to be. Be Adam Driver, Dallas Cowboys. Number 3 on my list, Dallas Cowboys need to continue their aggressive style within games. All right, so we've talked about being aggressive when it comes to building your roster, being aggressive when it comes to being willing to admit mistakes. This is something I think the Cowboys are actually pretty good at already. So that's why the word continue is right down there. Don't be afraid to go for on 4th down. And I feel like we live in this Cowboys go for it on fourth down. They get it. That was a great decision. I was saying at my TV, Mike McCarthy needs to go for it. Obviously, Mike McCarthy is going to be the play caller for the Dallas Cowboys, right? We all know that in 2023. You look at the Eagles, they are so unafraid because they have a great team. They know they can go for a fourth down, even if it's on their side of the 50, their own 40-yard line, whatever. They know they can go for it because you know what happens if they get it? It's another set of downs. You know what happens if they don't get it? Their amazing defense will stop things. And you know what? Even if they allow a score, they'll go back and score again. And that's not to say like never punt. I mean, there are obviously situations and moments where it makes sense to kind of, wave the white flag, so to speak. But I mean, you have to be aggressive. This is an aggressive league that we are watching every single week in the NFL. You have to be unwilling. You have to be unafraid is maybe the best way to say it. And again, I think the Cowboys I think Mike McCarthy deserves a lot of credit for this, and he doesn't get it a ton. But I think the Cowboys have to continue their aggressive mindset when it comes to who they are on Sundays with their roster. They have hopefully built, in an aggressive way. The final one for me. The Dallas Cowboys need to identify where the league is at in terms of play style. Now, this quote has been brought up a lot on a lot of podcasts and shows and things like that. Greg Olson, who I think has done a wonderful job. I know people are divided on that subject this season for Fox. Obviously, we'll call the game on Sunday. But Greg Olson was talking about the Eagles during the NFC Championship game, and you hear so much about how offensive coordinators or offensive play callers run the ball to set up the pass. You have to run the ball. You have to establish the run. You have to set up play action. You have to run the ball. That is a lie. You do not have to run the ball to set up play action. That is a lie. Do not let anybody lie to you about that. But Greg Olson had this line that I thought was so cool, again, in the NFC Championship game, talking about the Eagles. And so that made it less cool. But he said they passed to set up the run. And that there is some logic to that. I mean, the Eagles are an aggressive offense. They are an offense that will attack you in many different ways. They will challenge you vertically. And so what happens when they're doing that? You have to back off. And that's why, all these, runs that they have that you just, you sit and you watch, you're like, man, it's like 7 yards a pop. Like, how are they doing this? How is this happening so easily for them? It's because teams' defenses are afraid of them because they know that the Eagles will go off at any given moment because they're unafraid to. So you have to adapt and adjust to the times. The Eagles were a team that were running the ball at will a year ago. I talked about that, the 2021 version of them that lost in the playoffs to the Buccaneers. That was a super run-heavy team. And what did they do in the offseason? Did they say, all right, our focus, who we are, is running the ball. We're going to do that, and we're going to run. And then occasionally we're going to take some deep play action shots. No, what do they do now? They come out, they throw, they attack, they're aggressive, they're, pedal to the metal. And then when things loosen up, they run the ball. And that is adjusting and adapting to the current play style, the way defenses are playing in the NFL. And it's really smart and it's really frustrating to give them credit for that. But it is something that they are very good at, is adjusting and adapting to the modern times. And that's what the Cowboys are honestly missing in a lot of senses. With all of this, that's kind of emblematic of the entire point, right? I talked about Amari Cooper and how we were going to get to that. Jerry had the comment within everything about how he didn't regret it. I'm paraphrasing, and how, the production and the contract, things like that. Everybody loves to bring up the Amari Cooper contract, right? Everybody talks about, well, you had to get rid of him. He was making too much money. The Cowboys were the only team in the NFL. And look, I think that there's a little bit too much criticism going around for the Cowboys, all right? I feel like I've become a bit of a positive note on this. And so, but there are some things to offer legitimate criticism for. And the Cowboys did not properly evaluate the way that the wide receiver market was going to balloon a year ago. And as a result, the Amari Cooper deal looks great right now. If you could get Amari Cooper at $20 million right now, that's great. That's a bargain right now, given what all of the receiver contracts that we've seen since look like. And especially when you consider that players like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, especially CeeDee Lamb, are going to be eligible for new deals. I mean, the Amari Cooper deal, like the Dak Prescott deal, or any deal that was market rate before it, will only continue to look better as time goes on. And so you cannot live in these moments and say, well, he's making $20 million. Like, that feels like a lot. Adjust, adapt, get with the modern times. That is something the Eagles do very well that unfortunately the Dallas Cowboys do not. Now that we talked about that, let's read this quote one more time, because I don't think that this quote embodies the things we discussed. Anybody who thinks I won't take a chance, and this is again Jerry Jones talking about the idea of team building, won't take a chance, has misread the tea leaves. But I do think longer term, and I'm real hesitant to bet it all for a year. There's a lot of things that can happen for that year. In essence, we're seeing a couple of teams that have had some real success putting it all out there and paying for it later. Don't think that doesn't pop in my head and get my eye as far as doing it. And I know how to do that. It's part of what you put in that computer and what comes out We'll see how it comes, but it's pretty impressive. But that's pretty impressive to have two teams in the last 2 years to empty the bucket and get to the Super Bowl. But if you miss, it's a long go. Some of these cliches are what the problem is to me. Like this idea that bet it all for a year. Nobody's doing that. That is not with the modern times. Nobody is betting it all for a year. Teams are going, so to speak, all in and then doing it again. They're going all in on every year. They are figuring out, they are adjusting, they're adapting. This idea that you have to save for the following future is ridiculous. This line here after the Rams and Eagles part that have had some real success putting it all out there and paying for it later. You do not have to pay for it later. Adjust, adapt, become an elite team, Dallas Cowboys. I believe in you. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok at rj.ochoa. You can send me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, or you can drop a comment down below. We'll do our best to get to those also. It's going to be all right, everybody. We're going to make it through this. Go Chiefs. I hope you have a wonderful day. And see you next time. It's going to be a fun week. We have a lot of fun guests stopping by, so make sure you do subscribe. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next time.